Hey, I'm Nick Von Brack, and this is the Record Podcast. For those of you who haven't checked out the podcast before, this is a show where I talk to musicians, people in the music industry, in the production side of it, just kind of all over music, about their stories, how we met, and all sorts of good random tangents in between. And for this week, I am talking to a musician slash record label owner, and his name is Keith Latinen. He is from the band Empire, I Was a Lonely Estate, and he is also the owner of Count Your Lucky Stars Records. We got into a lot of good stuff on this one. We talked about his music history, what it's like to be in a band with your significant other, owning your own label, the end of Empire, as they broke up or ended the band recently, the time a car smashed through his house. It's a pretty good story. His obsession with board games and much more. And in honor of our guest in this episode, Keith has been kind enough to offer up a nice little giveaway. So if you're not familiar with the giveaways, what we do every now and then is if you go on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and you make a post about the Record Podcast and about something related to the guests. So if you went on Twitter and tagged the Record Podcast and Empire or Count Your Lucky Stars, something that promotes both things, but do it creatively, do it any way you want, and I'll pick a winner to announce on next week's episode. And what you will win is a record from Empire Was a Lonely Estate. So get out there and do that shit. But I was very appreciative of Keith for coming on the show and also the cool little giveaway, so thanks to him. And so go on Twitter at The Record Podcast without the A, or Facebook.com/The Record Podcast, or Instagram, The Record Podcast. Make a post, make sure I'm tagged so I can see it, and I'll announce a winner next week. In other exciting news, I will be on a podcast that is not my own coming up. So this week I'm going to be recording with the Misaligned podcast. If you haven't heard of that, you need to check it out. It is Misaligned, spelled with two S's, Missalligned, Misaligned Podcast. And Deanna Chapman runs that, and we're going to chat about, who knows, all kinds of shit. And that episode will be up in a couple weeks, and I'll put a little preview of it on an episode of the Record Podcast, so you can get a few minutes of it, and then if you like what you're hearing, you go check it out. So yeah, that's exciting. I'm excited to do that. All right, plugs. So I already kind of ran through them, but go check out therecordpodcast.com, facebook.com/The Record Podcast. Instagram is The Record Podcast, and Twitter is The Record Podcast without the A. Something I have forgotten to mention over the past several episodes is the iTunes review ratings. It's something that, to my knowledge, helps get the more people that review it, that rate it, it gets more out. You can get out into the world more, and they'll post it. They'll post podcasts and things that are kind of buzzing and things that are getting popular. So if you can go on iTunes, leave a review or rating or both, that'd be awesome. Doesn't have to be super long or anything, just a quick little something. It'll help this podcast kind of, get out in the world a little bit more. And in other personal plugs, there's a PayPal link. If you're not familiar with that, I set up a PayPal link, and the link is paypal.me/my name, Nick Von Brack. So paypal.me/NICKVOMBRACK. And right there, I'm taking donations to help kind of fund the podcast. But more importantly, I'm aiming to get a second microphone so I can do more in-person interviews. I have yet to do one for the show. I'm actually lining up to do one right now, and I'd love to get another nice microphone to be able to do that, so it sounds all nicey nice. So just chuck a couple bucks that way. I would appreciate it. I'll also use it for the future to kind of fund the hosting and any of the other costs that come with running the podcast. So much appreciated. Go check that out. Check out the PayPal link if you can spare $1, $5, whatever you can spare. And all the plugs that I already gave, you got all those. And final personal plug outside of all that stuff, if any of you out there are in need of video work, whether you got a wedding coming up that you want shot and edited, if you have a small business you want to run a promo for, things like that, or just your own personal project that you'd like some video help with, I am your man. So come check out my website, nickvonbrack.com, or get in touch with me really in any which way through the podcast or my own personal contacts. You can get in touch with me. I'm on Facebook. But yeah, I'd love to help out. Looking to do a little side work. So so get in touch with me that way. But aside from all that shit, let's get to why you are here. My guest is Keith Latinen, Empire, I Was a Lonely Estate, and Count Your Lucky Stars Records. This is my interview with him.
What's up?
How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
Good. How's this all sounding? Is this working out for you on your end?
Yeah, it sounds strangely crisper than my normal phone calls.
Oh, good. Well, I'm on a nice little mic on my end, so hopefully, and you sound pretty crisp for being. You're on a phone, right?
Yep.
Okay, nice. Yeah, man, thanks for doing this. This is so random and last minute.
That's awesome.
Usually when these sort of things happen, when I'm free to do it, I see who's on Facebook and that I'm actually been planning to interview anyways, and they're usually like, well, seeing as this was out of nowhere, no, I can't do this right now. So it just so happened to work that you were able to do it. So yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of me. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I've actually been wanting to do this with you for a while. We talked once or twice about doing this at some point, and I got really off track. I booked months and months ahead of all these people on Fridays and all this stuff, and then we had a baby, and the wheels just came off.
Yeah, bad.
And no one's really seemed to mind. I think I was planning so far in advance. They're just like, you know what, just get in touch, man. It's fine.
Right.
So,
yeah.
In my mind, I was like, yeah, I'll knock out one of these every week. And all of a sudden I was like, oh God, this really got off track. But yeah, so this will be interesting too, because my wife just started a night shift. She's a nurse, and the room I'm in currently shares the wall with my daughter's room, who is sleeping. So if it comes to it, I won't just all of a sudden leave you hanging, but I'll just let you know if I gotta
sure.
dip out
No,
for a
totally
minute.
Understand. Yeah.
But yeah, so those are the stakes currently, and I have 2 dogs who are downstairs who are just probably waiting to start barking at something random and meaningless. So there's a lot of good stuff going on here. What's going on in your house tonight?
Yeah. Tonight, actually, nothing. There is a storm coming. Finally.
Yeah. We were supposed to get something bad this way, and I mean, knock on wood, we haven't really had it.
We've had drought-like conditions pretty much.
Oh man!
So my lawn is super dead. Everything around here is dead.
No.
So yeah,
that's a bummer.
Actually, it's like there are random small patches that are green and growing, but it is almost worthless to even mow the lawn because those tiny areas. Yeah,
right.
It's pretty. Yeah, it's been really, really dry here. Actually, there were a bunch of firework bans. Over 4th of July because it's just so dry.
Right. Damn. Didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. Oh, wait, is that on my end? Oh, okay. Oh, my phone's going crazy. Yeah, so I guess, I don't know if you've heard this, this podcast or kind of what I do with this, but just kind of talk about basically anything music related with who I'm talking to, and most times I try to just start from the start and work our ways up. So for you, where do you musically start? I mean, all the way back from, it can be playing music in your room, the first band you're in. Where does it all kind of kick off for you?
Yeah, sure. So my very first band ever.
Oh, and please give the name too.
Yeah, right, because they're all amazing.
Yes.
My very first band ever was called Pica.
Okay.
Named after that disease where I think you eat what is it? Laundry detergent and all this. You have it's a weird. I'm gonna look it up right now.
I was gonna say that's a new one for me. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah. I'm going to read it loud. It is an eating disorder typically defined as a persistent ingestion of non-nutritious. Basically, you eat a bunch of things that you shouldn't be eating,
Oh,
like strange things that are not like edible things.
really?
So, hair, paper, drywall, paint, metal, stones, etc.,
So
etc.
it's not
Anyway,
exclusive. It's just you can just start eating all kinds of
yeah,
random
we
shit,
know.
and then you have
Oh,
pica.
not exactly an expert on it,
Yeah,
but in high school, we were like 16 years old and
sure.
that was a cool idea. But
Yeah.
that was a three piece I did, and then we had one of my friends joined on guitar. His name was Steve King, but he was not the Steve King.
Well, surely.
That would be pretty cool though. But anyway, he joined, and then we ended up starting another band pretty soon after, called Said the Girl, and that was like a band that I actually took, moderately seriously,
Yeah.
and did that in high school, and recorded. We have recorded two EPs.
Oh, nice. Are those floating around in existence somewhere?
They are not on the internet, to the best of my knowledge. Actually, there's one song that you can find. So Empire released a couple of discography tapes,
Yeah.
and on the first discography tape, if you let the classic hidden track,
Sure.
there is a band from Said the Girl on that, a song from
Nice.
Said the Girl on that. So that's a little secret, but yeah, no, not really. That was, I mean, this is before, like, this was in 1999, 2000 era. So like
Yeah.
this is before, I mean, like, I think we were on mp3.com.
Oh, sure.
If that gives you an indication of how old that is.
Yeah. So was pica just like the very first incarnation of anything music related for you, or did you play instruments like on your own or take lessons or anything before that?
Well, I played trumpet in middle school and high school.
Yeah, I've run
So,
into. I played trumpet too. I run into. It's not. I feel like of the instruments that people play in middle school, trumpet seems to pop up a lot.
yeah, I'll tell you the reason I played trumpet. Um, um, my grandpa had one,
Nice.
so
Well,
my
and
so my brother played it and I played it
well,
too.
and my
So
dad played, so I
yeah,
think
there,
there's some sort of ulterior motive there too. I'm sure.
sure, yeah. Well, I mean,
Um,
it makes sense, and they don't have to pay for an instrument,
there
and
you go.
you know, it's like it kind of amuses me. I don't know if you had to go through this, but for band, um, when they're assessing you, quote unquote, assessing you, and oh, it looks like you would play this
Yeah,
instrument or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
They're just telling, they're just telling like, um, these are the instruments that we need, so you should do this
Right,
one.
right, exactly.
But yeah, so that's why I played that. And what's actually funny is I was terrible in middle school and high school, and I played until I played up through my sophomore year, and then went to band camp my junior year, and then Kathy, my wife, who we met at band camp when I
Wow,
was a freshman. Um,
it's a true love
yeah,
story.
yeah. So, and to make it even nerdier, when we first started talking, I was not even playing, but I was sorting a Magic the Gathering deck. So she probably could
She had
have
a
made
case of the
some wiser
vapors, I'm
decisions.
sure.
Yeah.
Well,
But
that's
anyway,
awesome.
yeah. So anyway, she actually ended up quitting. She had knee surgery that summer, and she was a grade above me. So the only class that we could be in was band,
Yeah.
together, and I did not enjoy band at that point, and just didn't like the teacher. She didn't like me.
Yeah.
One of those things or whatever. And so I ended up quitting after band camp or whatever. But yeah, I stopped playing. So I stopped playing trumpet then. And then at some point for Empire, this was years and years later, picked up the trumpet again and was far, far better than I had ever been when I was actually in high school. So it's kind of strange.
Take that, middle
Yeah.
school band
Yeah.
teacher. Well, that's awesome. I see. I didn't realize you met your wife so long ago. So
Yeah.
were you just friends, or did you start dating in high school?
We
Or
started dating in high school.
oh
Yeah.
wow, that's awesome.
At this point, I've known her for longer than I haven't known her. which is crazy.
That is
We
weird.
just
When you get to a point when you can start to like break it down into how much lifetime you've been with a person, you're like, okay, this is wow, that's like a third or half of, or more than half of, like all of this
right,
time in my life.
and then consider like of the earlier years of your life, what do you really when do you really start actually remembering what was
Right,
happening? And
right.
so it's even more. Yeah, we actually just had our 10-year wedding anniversary
Ah,
in
congrats.
June. So yeah, thanks. So yeah, so it's crazy. We've been together for quite a while now since I was like uh 15 or something.
That's
I don't
awesome,
know,
man.
15 or 16. So
That
yeah, it's crazy. So but yeah, yeah. So and actually, it's funny because the last show that we ended up playing for Said the Girl, my high school band, before college started, we weren't intending on breaking up, but I was going to college at Michigan State, and our bassist was going to another school, and our drummer was still in high school, um, and our bassist was not going to college, or whatever.
yeah.
But oh no, he was in Western. Anyway, yeah, but he couldn't make it at the last show, so we had a bunch of random people fill in, and Kathy filled in for one song um, on our last show ever. And
Nice.
she was she was at work. She was working at Hallmark. She left work, drove to the show, played bass for the one song, and then drove back and finished her shift.
That's awesome.
So,
What a trooper.
super random. Yeah.
Yeah. So how long after Said the Girl is Empire right after Said the Girl, or is there a little bit in between?
No, yeah, there's quite a bit of time in between. So
Okay.
then I went to college, and this is sad to admit, but going into college, being 18 years old, I was like, wow, like part of the reason I'm going to college is so I can meet people to play in a band,
Right.
and then I just went through like a series of a very long drought of not finding or finding people and jamming with them, and it not working out or whatever.
Yeah.
And it would get to the point where like, so, I played Empires very similar to the stuff I listened to in high school or whatever. It was, like Mineral and Death Cab and Jimmy Eat World and stuff that was obscure at the time.
Hmm.
And so it was really difficult to find people. I remember like one time some kid was wearing like a band shirt of a band I liked. It was an obscure band, and I was like, "Hey, do you play an instrument?" Just because he was wearing the shirt,
Yeah.
did not work out that well. Yeah, so I just was in various bands of not really any note
Yeah.
until I was a junior in college. So 2 years of like finding random bands and not really getting far.
Yeah.
And then I was in a band called Sea Defeats Sparrow,
Okay.
and it was like kind of like Taking Back Sunday,
Okay.
kind of,
No shame in that game.
Yeah, yeah. It was fun. It was it was one of the, with the exception of Empire, possibly even like that was the most popular local band that I was ever in. Like it was
Okay.
really catchy and upbeat, and I actually I started that band playing drums
Really?
yeah, and then halfway through moved to guitar.
Man,
So,
you're just all over the place. You know how to do everything.
yeah.
Trumpet, singing, guitar, drums.
Yeah, well, I figured at that time, the period of time where I couldn't find people in a band, I was like, well, everybody always needs a drummer. So,
Yeah, there you go.
yeah, so I taught myself how to play drums or whatever, um, and then, made myself more, more marketable, as it were.
You were determined to be in a band,
Yeah.
man.
Oh
That's
man, that was like,
determination.
that was like, it's hard for me as, you know, as a 33-year-old adult to remember having such tunnel vision, but literally all I cared about was music. And it was, I think that, in
Yeah.
fact, I think that when I was in college, um, I think that intensity was probably even too much for some people, because it was like, that's all I wanted to do. And it was like, if you weren't on the same page as me, it was probably, going to cause an issue at one point or another, as far as passion,
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what you want to do and you go after it, man.
Yeah.
No wasting time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when does Empire get in the picture then?
So at the end of college, um, we stopped playing in Empire or in Seafeed Sparrow. It was a band for 2 years, which is still a pretty long time for a
Sure.
band. And then um, so then I moved back home to my hometown in Fenton, And Kathy and I had proposed to Kathy at a CD Feed Sparrow show, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. And anyway, yeah, and all of my friends and family and her family was there, and we
That's
had all these
awesome.
this like elaborate reasoning for them being there. And of course, in retrospect, she probably should have realized it, but like you don't really think of it as
Right.
going. Anyway, so we we moved back home to Fenton to our respective parents' houses in preparation to get married, and I took a job at Sherwin-Williams,
Oh, is
which
that
is exciting.
the paint place?
The paint place,
Nice,
yes.
nice.
Like just a part-time job or whatever, and that's when I started a band. Not not Empire. We
Damn, man,
started a
so
band
many
called
bands.
I know. We started a band called Anna. I started a solo project called Anna Flyaway, and then we ended up Kathy ended up joining and playing guitar, and the original bassist for Empire, who was also in my high school band, played bass for a while. And then yeah, so that turned. We actually recorded an entire album, and never did anything with it. And within the past year or so, I've actually found the ancient laptop that somehow still runs, and because I had recorded it
Yeah.
and found all the waves, and we're getting it mixed and mastered and actually
That's
putting it out.
awesome.
So that was a band for a year or so. And then Kathy and I got married. What Empire started actually predated before we got married, but it started out as a solo project. Actually, the reason that I started Empire was to get good at recording, so I could use that as a guinea pig. So Anna Flyaway would sound good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So it's just like
and
a
so
little side project.
yeah, it was so, and it was just, I was like, I'm gonna call it something ridiculous because it doesn't matter. It's a side project, and it's just me doing everything. And I've always wanted, like, my intention for the first EP was to not use any distortion, just because,
Yeah.
and to record all the instruments myself and record it myself, and mix it and master it myself, and so we did that, and it was almost 100% done, and the Anna Flyaway was almost 100% done. And then we got married, and then I took an internship at Militia, if you remember that
Oh yeah,
record
yeah,
label.
yeah. Sure. Were
Yeah.
they based out of Michigan?
No, actually, they were based in California.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because do you ever have those moments where like you feel like really I don't know, like a clear idea in your head that you want to do something, and the path just seems kind of aligned. And so I had one of those like
Sure.
epiphanies, right? And I emailed a couple record labels, and then I just stopped. I just forgot about it or whatever. And then they emailed me back like I don't know, like a month or two later, and they were like, "Hey, if you're still interested, in the internship, you can, we can do it this summer or whatever." And I didn't really honestly have anything else
Yeah.
going on. And also, I think that in my mind, growing up, I had romanticized California as like this like mythical place for
Right.
me anyway.
Sure.
And so so I took so I took the internship, and after we got married, we went out, we moved out to California, to Long Beach, and we were thinking if it went well, we were gonna like stay there.
Yeah.
So.
Wasn't
Um,
Militia the only thing that's come to mind for who was on? Wasn't Copeland on Michelin? Was Michelin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Copeland and the Epsley cast had signed to them, and the Gel Sound.
Okay.
Um, but they're mostly like more of like I would say like more known for like pop punk, like Cartel. If you remember that
Oh,
band.
gotcha. Sure.
Yeah, and Rufio, I think it started on
Oh yeah,
Militia.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, and I went out there for more of the indie side of things, which was I think less of the focus
Yeah.
at that point. Um, but yeah, so we went out there, and it was my first time being away from home for an extended
Yeah.
period of time, because I went to college in state, and it was like an hour away, and I didn't have a car, but that's not the same as being half the entire
Right.
country away or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, we went out there, and I remember this is stupid, but you know, like as a kid, like part of the reason I was like, I'll go and I'll pitch my band while I'm there,
Yeah.
you know, and see what they think or whatever. And then it just, you know, it just didn't end up being what I don't think what I romanticized it to be.
Sure.
And they had hired really far too many interns. By the time I got there, there wasn't really anything for me to do.
Oh no. I don't like where
So
this is going.
yeah, I mean, so to be honest with you, like a lot of the things I did was like add friends on MySpace and you know what I mean, stuff
Yeah.
like that. It was just and like I just think that they were, you know, just had too many interns and yeah, so they just were overstaffed and I think I got there like because I was getting married, I came later than they, you know, they had asked or whatever, and I think by the time I got there, most of the jobs were taken.
Okay.
So. But I do remember, it's funny because I remember the last day I was there, I had kind of lost any illusions of like, you know, like them signing me or anything working out like that.
Yeah.
But I remember I was like, why I came out here, I might as well show some people so I showed it to one of the guys who worked there. And this is not like, a spiteful thing or whatever, but he was like, your name is too long. You play, which, hey, I mean, that's not, it's a stupid name. It's stupidly long and I will name it that now. But he was like, and you also play music that it doesn't really matter anymore, or exist anymore. So you'll never get anywhere, but
Wow.
it wasn't like, I don't think he was trying to be like a jerk about it per se, and I don't think
Yeah.
he'd even remember saying this. So like whether or not you consider us successful or not, it was never like to prove a point or anything like that. It was
Yeah.
very like zero motivation, but it is just kind of funny looking back. Because I think yeah, he was a nice enough person, but I just don't think that, you know, who can predict what's going to be.
Right. Still cold-blooded, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a kind of pretty crushing. I mean, the whole experience, to be completely honest with you, was pretty crushing for us.
Yeah.
It just was not what we thought it would be, and because it was our first, like I think if I had to go out there now, I don't hold like anything against it, but I definitely did for a while, and it
Yeah.
was just, you know, it just didn't work out, and sometimes it doesn't. But I think if I were to try it again now, although I have no desire, I think with a healthier mentality and more realistic mentality, I think, you know, if we needed to or wanted to stay there, we could. But yeah, I just definitely didn't have like a great view of that, and even wrote some songs kind of damning that whole situation. So
Did that kind of spark the interest of record labels, like you nosing around there, like being able to see like how it works? It was that, I mean, by the sounds of that, almost make you want to turn away from doing that, but then years later you have
right,
your
you know,
own.
it's
So
funny because I never, for as far as Count Your Lucky Stars goes, I never we never intended to start a record label per se. It was just one of those things that sort of just happened.
yeah.
So because when Empire, so when we came back from California a couple months later, that's when we decided, since I had already had the EP recorded, and I guess we could have changed the name because nothing was released at the time, but
Right.
at that point I was pretty like stuck with that name. I really wanted to use that name for
Yeah.
whatever reason. But we were like, okay, well, Anna Flyaway broke up. It just was breaking up, on the verge of breaking up, by the time that we were getting married. And I was like, well, I already did all this EP, so we might as well just use this like as a springboard. And so we found a drummer and started playing out or whatever. But then we self-released that CD, our first CD, called When the Sea Became a Giant. And then, yeah, then one of my biggest dreams was to have like something on vinyl, like to have
Sure.
something on 7-inch. So there was this record label that I found, and they were interested in doing it. The split, or well, we went to do a split. So we were going to do a split with. Do you know Look Mexico?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were going to do a split with them, and this is probably 2006. I don't know, something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, and there was a record label, just a really tiny record label. They were called Lucky Creature Records, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, we're interested in doing a split. We're putting out the record." And then Look Mexico got signed to this band called, or this label called Lujo. Do you remember that record label,
No,
Lujo
I'm not
Records?
familiar with them.
Anyway, and then Lujo, I guess, he was talking about like contracts and legality things or something like that. And the guy who ran Lucky Creature was like, I just don't want to get involved in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then we didn't do a split with Look Mexico, and we were like, we had written songs, and we were ready. We were ready to do it, but
Right.
yeah, it didn't happen. But a guy who had been distributing our CD in the UK, his name is Andy from a record label called Strictly No Capital Letters, SNCO. I kind of fished around to see if he'd be interested in releasing a 7-inch from us.
Yeah.
And he said he's like, yeah, if you can find a label in the States, then yeah, we can do it. So he would do the UK side, and we would do something in the States. And we were like, to me and Kathy, that was sort of like, hey, like this is half price for us. We can just put it out on our own label, and we're only really paying half because he's paying the other half.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's sort of how kind of like he sort of started, And then we started playing, like touring and playing a lot more shows, and we just kept meeting more and more bands that were amazing, and there were no labels doing, what the bands that were playing that style of music.
Right.
So we just started putting out records for bands that we were friends with and that we loved as we met them on the road, and sort of just kind of built from there.
So actually this can tie kind of back, because you said that was around 2006, you trying to do the split with Look Mexico?
Yeah.
And if my memory serves me correctly, that was probably around the ballpark time of when we met, or when we at least played that first show. And we were talking about this the last time we saw each other. That was some CD store or something, like the back room of a CD
Action
store.
Replay in Lansing, Michigan. Yes.
Yeah, that was like a booked tour on our end, and then we played with you guys. And I don't remember at all who else played, but I know it was you guys and us, and it was a CD store. And then, and I think we kept in touch. I don't know if I just remember always like having your contact info, maybe checking in with you now and then all of a sudden we end up playing Bloodfest, and like I think I walked by you, or we crossed paths, and I looked at you and I was like, damn, that dude looks familiar. Like, I know that dude. And I think if I'm remembering this correctly, I just kind of yelled your name out, like, Keith. And then you turned around and we started talking. I was like, and we just realized that, I was like, okay, good. I was like, glad it wasn't just some dude I just yelled a random name at. And then we figured out how much we actually, then we went back that far. But yeah, it's just so weird sometimes how that shit works out. But, but yeah, so then we played Bloodfest together, and that was super fun. And then we ended up staying at your house, you and Kathy, and your little pup's name.
Yeah.
What's the little pup? What's
Ollie.
What's your little pup's
Ollie.
name? Ollie? Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, so we all stayed there and hung out, and you showed us your little castle with, all the records and like all the board games and shit. I mean, I've never seen so many games in my life. Like
you should see it now. It's ridiculous. I have over 200 games.
Like when
it's a problem.
Like that's seriously like someone having a record collection, just looking at like, how do you even know what record to pick out? Like, how do you know what game to pick out? Like, what mood are you in? 200 games. That's like,
no.
I just don't even know how do you just kind of close your eyes and pick one out, or do you know like different moods for different games?
I think, this is sort of an admission that I think a lot of board gamers will admit is I own a lot of games that I haven't played yet.
Ah, okay.
So we'll try and pick something that we've been meaning to play for a while.
Sure.
And then, try and get that to the table. But it takes, these games take a long time to learn. Actually, we were learning how to play a new game tonight. So.
So this is interrupting your learning a new game.
No. We did it. What we are doing lately, what we're trying to do is learn the rules and set the game up one night, and then the next night,
Oh, okay.
if we can get a chance to play it.
Nice. Man. And so then even more so after that, we stayed with you and hung out and, had a good little time. And then I come to find out from your posting that some crazy shit happens to your house.
Oh yeah,
So what the hell happened?
it's probably one of the most random stories, and I've had a lot of very random things happen to me.
Sure.
Yeah, so we were. It was actually, um, I think it was last year. It was last year around January. I, yeah, yeah, because it was a year. It's been like a year and some change since it
Yeah.
happened. Yeah, so we were so Kathy and I bought a house um earlier that fall. Um, and then we went immediately on like a 2 month tour.
Yeah.
So we literally pretty much put things in our house and then left.
So that wasn't the
Um,
place that we stayed at?
it was not the place that we
Oh,
stayed at.
okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. Which actually is somewhat more confusing in that we don't live. We live. It's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's pretty open here. I
Yeah.
mean, like across the street, there's like a farm with like a lot of land. We live probably like 100 feet or so off the road. Anyway, so and I remember it was being the day of the Pro Bowl because I was recording the Pro Bowl. I was also Kathy's, yeah, who watches the Pro Bowl. I do for some reason, but
I wasn't even laughing at that, but now that you mentioned that is funny.
anyway, it was Kathy's parents' wedding anniversary. So we had gone back to our hometown, back to Fenton, and we had gone, like gone to like a lunch for them, and then stopped by my parents' house, and then the day just sort of had gotten away from us, and we had thought about like. We were supposed to be painting because we're finally getting around to painting,
Right.
to moved in and whatever, and because the day had gotten away from us, we we had forgotten. So we came back home and we forgot that we hadn't taped yet. So we started taping the room, and so we let our dog in the room with us because we were taping. As opposed to painting, I didn't want the
Yeah.
dog. And anyway, and we were taping it off, and then we heard this like all of a sudden this like gigantic thud, and it kind of felt like I don't know, like an earthquake or like a I don't know, like a tiny explosion or or something. And the first thought was like what is that? Like
Yeah.
maybe some records, because so we bought the house that we bought. We purposely bought a house with a really big basement so we could put the label downstairs and then
Yeah.
have our house upstairs. And so our first thought was, well, maybe something fell, like a shelf fell or something
Yeah.
somehow in the basement. But that would create like a series of thuds, right?
Right.
That wouldn't just be one compact thud. So we ran out of the room, and immediately everything felt draftier. And this is,
Oh,
by the way, to set the scene. It's the middle. It's like the dead of winter that this
right.
happened. Um, and yeah, it felt drafty. And we ran out to our living room, and in our living room, we see a gigantic truck that had driven into our house, which is it just. And I was like, um, can I swear in this podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, uh, so we went to the door, and I was like, "What the fuck just happened?" And this guy, in probably like his mid-20s, gets out and he goes, "Whoa!" He goes, "Oh, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I saw a deer or something," and he was just like super hammered,
Oh,
super drunk,
Christ.
and I think it was. I mean, okay, I'm not an expert. But I think when most people drive drunk, it's usually like pretty late at night, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like in the wee hours in the morning or something like that. But this was like it was like 8 or 9 o'clock or something. It was
So
like,
he's drinking all day long.
yeah, I think he had been like ice fishing or something and just sort of day
Oh,
drinking or
yeah.
whatever. Anyway, and then and I was like, because I was like, what the fuck happened? And he was like, oh, like there's a deer or whatever. And then um he started, so his truck is embedded in our house, right?
Yeah.
And he just started running. He just started running away.
After the deer?
Yeah, right. And what we hear this, and I was like, "Where the fuck are you going? Your truck is in our house." And told Kathy to call 911.
Yeah.
And we also heard this voice, and it's like, she goes, "That's my husband." And so it was very confusing.
A lot
But
of a lot of moving parts
yeah,
here.
yeah, and very quickly, and obviously disorienting in the fact that, of course, no one expects something like that to
Sure.
happen. So Kathy calls 911, and they come out, and this truck is through. It goes through our living room and the guest bedroom, and but actually two of the guest bedrooms. So it connects one guest bedroom to another where there should not be. Anyway, so yeah, and so the cops come, and we tell them what had happened,
Right.
and it turns out that his father-in-law, it was his mother-in-law's truck that he had crashed. It was like this brand new, really nice truck.
Oh man.
By the way, he also had a gun in his truck.
Sure.
Uh,
Why wouldn't
anyway, of course. And,
to get the deer?
Yeah, sure. So or shoot fish.
Yeah.
But anyway, apparently he lives on the same. His father-in-law and mother-in-law lived on the same street as us, and I don't know which house. And I honestly don't. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
But anyway, and when he crashed the truck, he just ran
home.
Either that or his wife was following him. I'm not really clear on that, but he ran to their place, and then his dad was the chaplain of Lansing Fire Department.
Oh,
so
plot thickens.
Yeah, so he called the police and he was like, "Hey, you're going to be looking for my son-in-law," because I mean, his car was embedded in our house, so there was no way that we were not going to find out who it was. And so I think, yeah, so they went and they picked him up. But so then the concern was, once the truck was pulled from our house, that our roof would collapse.
Oh, fuck.
Right. So they came, and so that an emergency restoration company came, and they propped up our house with like these like gigantic 2x4s essentially to brace everything, and then a tow truck came and towed. We have video of it too, actually, but they towed the truck out of our house.
Jesus.
So, and to make matters worse, he totaled our van as well. So he smashed into our van and then ping-ponged into our house. And I think they say, like, when you're in an accident like that, I think that he had passed out, and didn't come to until after he hit our house, because he walked away.
Right,
well, literally ran away from it. Right.
Yeah.
Because I think what they say is, like, if you're conscious when that's happening, your body naturally, like, braces itself and tightens.
Yeah, that's how you get injured. Yeah.
Right. But he being completely out of it.
Yeah.
So just a really, really, really messed up situation.
Yeah.
And
how fast must he have been going to hit your van and then still have enough speed to go into your house and like clear a couple of rooms?
Yeah. No, I mean, I still, to this day, we find pieces of truck in the so we have like a garden in front where we have like a rose bush or whatever, and I just occasionally, or like by where our other van is parked, our new van is parked now, like there'll be like, I'll find like a piece of reflector or what, or something like that, and it's just insane. So.
Oh my God, I can't believe you guys were home for that. I just assumed.
Well, here's the craziest thing, right? Two things. One, if we hadn't waited, because we went to Kathy's parents' anniversary party, and then we went to my parents because they live in the same town, and just the day had gotten away from us. The place that our dog was always hanging out when we locked him out of our room, was in the guest bedroom.
Oh no!
That the truck hit, right? So if we had spent more time, if we had been punctual, he wouldn't have been in the room, because we would have been painting, and who knows what would happen.
Jesus,
but even more insane is, because we were painting that room, we hadn't gotten that far, we had just taped it. Because we were painting our room, we were going to be sleeping in the room that got the most
Oh
damage.
my
And so I
God.
almost assuredly we would have been if he had been driving at normal drunk driving hours, like it's super late at night. I
Right.
mean, that went right through where we would have been. So
There's too many ifs and buts in that sense. That makes me so uncomfortable.
yeah,
Like
right.
that
It's
is
so
so
random. Like how
crazy.
many things, how many small things, you know,
Jesus, man.
how small factors, and who knows how many factors were on his side as well.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, so just
Fuck.
really insane. And so, and to add to that, of course, there was a giant hole in our house.
Yeah.
And then, so the restoration company was like, hey, we can come tomorrow and we can start reframing it and insulating it and get drywall pretty quickly, right? And so we were like, oh, that's amazing. Um, and they came out the next day and they started
What
they
did you
started
do that
doing it.
night?
We stayed in our house in
What?
that room, and it was very, very, very cold.
Yeah, shit.
But and like it was probably one of the most bizarre calls that I've ever made. So I called my brother, and it was super late at night. Right at this
Yeah.
point, when once the police had come and gone, and they pulled the truck out. Well, actually, they hadn't pulled it out yet because they were like, okay, so because we had just moved into the house not that long ago, there was still we had just put stuff in those rooms,
Yeah.
right? We just put stuff in those rooms, and so we needed to get that all out of there for them to pull the truck out.
Right.
And so I called my brother and my brother-in-law. Ended up coming as well, and I remember calling them and calling my siblings and my parents and being like, I called my brother and I was like, "Hey," he's like, "Hey," it was like, "What's up?" He's like, "Not much," kind of like wondering why I'm calling so late.
Right.
And he's like, "You," and I was like, a truck just sort of drove into our house, so I was wondering if you're not busy, if you could maybe come over and help move some stuff or whatever." So it was pretty funny. Of course he came or whatever. And
Right.
so yeah, that was an insane night. Very, very cold. And then the people, so the restoration company came the next day and they were starting to they reframed it and insulated it. But that night they just put up like like a cork or like a sheet or whatever
Yeah.
of wood, you know, to keep it from the snow and et cetera, and the weather,
Yeah.
whatever. Anyway, the next day they came and they were doing things, and we called the insurance company as well, and the insurance company was like, "Stop! No, don't do anything. We have to come out there. We have to check."
Oh,
So things got really, really slow, and it took a ridiculous amount of time
right.
and then on top of this, okay, so it was less than a week before tour, which
Mm.
was a 5-year anniversary tour for What It Takes coming out.
Yeah.
So it was like one of those things that's like really difficult to reschedule.
Right.
And so but the first thought was like, hey, we're not going on tour. We're
Yeah.
obviously not going on tour. But somehow, and this is another series of crazy events, but somehow we were able to still go on tour.
Was the gear in the van? Like what
The gear
was?
was not in the van. There was nothing in the van.
Yeah.
And so what happened is, so we called and we were like, we had gone back and forth if we could go, if we couldn't go, and it was like, it was really touch and go, and there were a lot of moments where like 100% we can't go on this tour, or
Yeah.
100% we're gonna make this tour happen. Um, and uh, Warren and there were a couple of people like Warren Franklin was going on tour with us, and I was playing in his band, and um, our drummer and our bassist John and Gooey were both playing bass for Warren, and um, so there were a lot of moving parts there as well, right? So, but
Right.
they were coming from he was coming from Chicago or from Rockford, Illinois. So it was like, should he come out or should he not come out? And
Right.
so he ended up coming out, and then yeah, so we sort of had to just figure out what to do. And what we ended up doing was, so we didn't have a van, right? That was not an option. So Kathy called the guys and we call our insurance company, and they said, because we just had PLPD on the van, because it was an old van, right?
Okay, yeah.
So we just had that coverage, and our insurance company said we're not going to cover it because even though you were not um, you were not driving it, and it was privately parked on your property, it was still an accident or whatever. So whatever legal, logical
Just another
reason they
kick to the
had for
balls.
not doing it, right? Yeah. So we were like, okay, well they were like, you should go, So we were like, okay, we're gonna try and go through his insurance company.
Yeah.
So we called his insurance company, and they were like, okay, well we're going to we have to make a claim for this, so you can't, it has to be, you can't take it anywhere. Not
Yeah.
that we could really take it anywhere, mind
Right.
you, but you can't take it anywhere. But Kathy was like, well, we need a call. We were going on tour. This is our job.
Yeah.
We need to, we need to do this. And so like, we were like, well, we can give you like a car. And we were like, we have a 15 passenger van now, but we were like, we had a 12 passenger van. Like you can't tour in a car
Yeah.
and they were like, so they kind of explained the situation and pushed it. And they were like, okay, well, you can rent. They ended up paying for a 12 passenger van for us. But here's the terms they gave us, and this is really messed up. They said, so this is like a 10-day tour, right?
Yeah.
And it was everywhere. It was a little bit of East Coast, or a little bit of the Midwest, and not to the East Coast. And we also played a date in Toronto. So they were like, we are going to rent you the van, but when we finish the report, when we finish like coming out and assessing it, the minute we're done, essentially, we're not paying for
Oh,
you.
jeez.
So the rest of the time that you're out there, and then there was like you have unlimited miles in the Midwest, but anywhere on the East Coast past certain miles you drive a day, you have to pay like an exorbitant fee for
Jesus.
whatever. And so you're like, okay, whatever. We're gonna go, we're gonna do this. And so we did the first couple days in the Midwest, and we actually came back. I'm a huge like football fan.
Yeah.
So Super Bowl Sunday, we came back, and I took the day off for Super Bowl Sunday, and we came back here for that.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, and so to add to this craziness, um, two things. One, there was a massive storm coming,
Of course.
like a really bad snowstorm coming.
Yeah.
So we ended up leaving. We had to leave. We were like, should we leave before or after it? And we had to leave before. So we left at like 5 or 6 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing was our next show was in Toronto, and so we go through Detroit, or Port Huron or whatever. I can't remember which port it was, but we go through logically, and you drive to Toronto, and then we were going to Rochester, New York. So it was like a logical planned tour, right?
Yeah.
Here's the catch. The first thing that they said when we went to rent the van was, you can't take this vehicle out of country.
Of course
It's just
it is.
not something you can do. And so we hemmed and hawed and tried to figure it out. Like, what are we going to do? Is it worth the risk, et cetera, et cetera?
Right.
And like, they have tracking devices in a lot of those things. And, it
Oh,
would be like an
yeah.
exorbitant fee. So we decided, and we're like, this huge storm is coming. I'm not really sure if it's possible. And so then we found out. So we were going to cancel the show. It just wasn't going to be possible. We were going to do every other show, but it just wasn't going to be possible. But we all were really against it, but didn't really see any other real way of doing it, right? But then we saw on the Facebook event that somebody was flying from Calgary area,
Mm-hmm.
and they had spent like a lot of money, on this, and so like like $1,000 whatever dollars,
Jesus.
and so like we can't cancel.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing is we drove to Buffalo, rented a van in Buffalo, left that van, rented, by the way, the exact same van, but left that van in a parking structure,
Yeah.
transferred all of our gear over, drove to the show in Toronto, played the show in Toronto, spent the night at one of our friends' house in Toronto, and then drove back and transferred all the stuff back. By the way, seats and everything too, we had to remove all this back into the other van and returned it just before we would have got charged another day.
Wow.
So we were very dedicated to that happening,
I hope
apparently.
that person appreciated that.
Yeah, actually, his name is Tevin Straub, and he's a really cool guy. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and we become friends since. And
Sure.
But anyway, it was really important when we had saw somebody else had, gone to that length to see us that we fulfill our end of the
Right.
obligation, no matter how, insane it was. And so anyway, so they ended up. So another thing that was on our mind the whole time is, when is the insurance going to call? When they going to
Right.
call? And they weren't calling, and then they ended up calling. And we were just like ignoring like their calls because we wanted, we don't want to pay.
Right.
They ended up getting a hold of us, I think, on the Friday before, and we were going to be back on Monday or Tuesday or whatever. And they're like, okay, so we went out and we assessed your car. And by the way, one of my friends was kind enough to stay at our house that week
Yeah.
while we were gone. Anyway, Dave said, we assessed your car and it's totaled. So we're totaling it out. And so come return the car now. And we're like, well, we can't return the car. We're in New York or wherever we were.
Yeah.
I can't remember where we were. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to charge you for this or whatever. And then when we went to return the car at the end of the tour, we explained the situation, and the lady there was like, well, I'm just going to charge the whole thing to their insurance, and we'll see what happens if they, try and refute it or whatever. And
Right.
actually, fortunately, they didn't. So we didn't end up having
That's
to pay
awesome.
those extra days or whatever. So
Yeah, that's great.
yeah. But yeah, that was, and then I would say it probably took into midsummer for everything to really get fixed for
Yeah.
a house.
Damn,
So
dude.
yeah, I mean, like, they got the drywall up was relatively. I mean, it felt like forever at the time, right? But it was relatively soon after. But then cosmetically, we had to get new windows. We had to
Yeah.
blah blah blah. So it took a real long time for that. But
That's crazy, man. And you guys are still in that house now?
yes.
Wow.
And it's all fixed up now. And so when we were talking about board games earlier, though,
Yeah.
if it had happened a week earlier, it would have been way less detrimental to me because less than a week before that had happened, we painted that room, which takes a while to paint every room.
Sure.
So we had painted that room, and we moved all of my board games into that room. And he destroyed all of my, like, he ran his truck and destroyed so many of my board games. It was heartbreaking.
Stabbed you in the front.
Yeah, right. Well, the thing was, so it ended up not doing any structural damage to the house somehow, which was really great, right?
Yeah.
So the foundation was fine. And the stuff in the other room, it damaged a good amount of stuff, but nothing that couldn't be replaced in the other room.
Yeah.
But then, of course, all of the stuff in those rooms had to go somewhere, so those went downstairs in the basement, where the label was, and so that was a great inconvenience as well.
Right.
So it was just a very long and drawn out ordeal.
Yeah, I'd say shit. That's so crazy. And where in relation, or how long after that all? Wait, so you said that was a year ago?
Yeah, a year and some months ago, yeah.
And how long after that, or when do the wheels start turning for Empire to be wrapped up as a band?
Well, okay. So there was a lot of things that sort of factored in that situation. And it's actually really interesting because I haven't really we never really formally talked about this.
Yeah.
And when you originally asked me to do this podcast, I knew the band wasn't going to be around, but I wasn't able to talk about it
Yeah.
at that time anyway. So it's kind of nice to be able to, talk about it openly without, So the way the Empire operated for a super long time was, it started off as a solo project, right? And then for our first album, I played a majority of everything, and Kathy played guitar on like a handful of songs. And then we would get members and we would lose members, but I had that mentality that I had always had, where like I can't slow down, I can't stop, and so if we didn't have members, I would just record the missing pieces essentially. So our first album was mostly me and Kathy, and then a lot of stuff in between is still me, or me and Kathy or whatever. And then on tour, what we would do is Kathy and I would, once we lost enough members, we just started borrowing people from other bands. So we went on tour with like the Reptilian, and their rhythm section became our rhythm section.
Nice.
Right. And so on and so forth. And then Kathy got a full-time job and just got kind of tired of touring.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that, and it was me and three other people. So whatever band we were on tour with, I would borrow all like three of their members. But the advantage to that was, well, first of all, you spend a lot more time together, and it's really nice, and you get this like tightness and
Right.
like a friendship that if you're on tour with another band, it's not the same.
Right.
If you're playing shows with them, but you're not spending every moment with
Right.
them.
Exactly.
And so we just started doing that and kept doing that, and I don't know. At some point, the problems with that is the pros are like you can tour. If you can tour, you can almost always find another band to tour, right?
Right.
So that's really nice. It's a lot cheaper because you share gear, you share gas money. It's easier to find a place because two bands can easily fit if it's one extra person and two extra people or whatever. And it's easy. It's just there's no setup time in between. Between those two bands.
Yeah, there's a lot of advantages there.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of advantages. The disadvantage was no matter who they were, it's not your band.
Right.
So it's never going to be quite the same. They're never going to play. They're all going to play. They all have slightly different variations on how the song is. And they were doing me a favor, and I always appreciated that. So I never, that didn't bother me. And also it was nice that they could make it their own as well.
Yeah.
Right. But the biggest disadvantage, I think, it was you could never get as tight as you would be with your actual band, and if somebody requested something, unless they wanted a very specific, like if it was on a very specific set list, couldn't play it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's true.
And so that was awesome, but very taxing on me. And plus, imagine having to, how much it sucks to have to relearn a song. But imagine having to reteach that song to people over and over, and then have to play that song over and over and over again. And just kind of I think wore on me after a while. And then what ended up happening is, so when we recorded our last album, that was Kathy played all four guitar parts, and I played everything else. So I played guitar and all the other parts, whatever. And then one of our on and off again drummers rejoined the band, and then Gooey, who was no longer in Dowsing, moved out to Michigan to rejoin to play in Empire. And so then for the first time in since 2009, and this was 2014, since the first time since 2009 we had a permanent lineup.
Oh wow.
And it was really awesome.
Yeah.
And then it just it didn't, and we actually it just ended up where another person ended up leaving, and I was just like, I had told them, and I held true to this, where it was like, if any of you leave, it's not going to be, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think this is too much for me to keep going. And so one of them left, and I was like, okay, this is kind of it for me,
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of shit that I think outside of a band, the fan is just like, well, what do you mean? You've been doing it? Why would you stop all of a sudden? But that's the stuff you got to consider, especially, you're saying like every tour you're teaching these songs over and over. So it's not even just like, oh, I've been with these guys and we've played these songs. It's like a whole other level of like playing a song 4 times over, this many times, relearning it, reteaching it. Yeah, I mean, even if you love those songs, at a certain point, you're just gonna be like, oh yeah, fuck it already.
Some songs I'm happy to never play again. I did. One nice thing was, though, there were a number of members that were repeat members, and it made it way easier. So, for example, when we did our last tour, we borrowed Stuart to play drums for us, and he had been playing drums for us for. I don't know. He did like 5 or 6 tours or something stupid with us. So it was really it felt pretty natural. You know what I mean? It was. I would still preferred to have John, because John had the history and played the songs exactly like we all knew him like the back of our hands. Right. But if I couldn't have John, then Stuart was like that next. Yeah. The next post, and it felt really good. To do that. But I think also whether or not bands might want to admit this too, I mean, we were kind of stuck in this. Maybe you know how this feels, but we kind of got to a certain level, like a ceiling, I think, and we were
Yeah.
just kind of stuck there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we were just. I think that a number of factors come into play, right? One is you are no longer the new kid on the block, so
Yep.
you're not a new and exciting thing. So no
Sure.
matter what you do, and so for this whole emo revival or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
We predated that, helped, we're one of the bands I think that helped, bring it to something more than it was,
Yeah.
right? So we were always around for those people.
Right.
Right, so like think about this. You start listening to a band in middle school and you're in college and you hear this band is still around and you're like, wow, I remember this from when I was in middle school. I can't
Right.
believe this band is still a band or
Right.
whatever. So like everybody knew who we were, who could maybe help us move to another level, but it just wasn't going to happen,
Yeah.
and that's fine, but like I think sometimes you have to know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, we similarly had definitely had some situations like that too, where like you feel you have all the potential as a band because you're playing good shows, you have this
mhm,
fan base, you can look at these stats of, numbers on, whatever MySpace and Facebook pages and
mhm,
any kind of positive feedback you're getting. But at a certain point too, yeah, you've either played these venues multiple times and it's like just as many people or you don't
mhm.
see anything kind of like growing. You assume, I mean, and there is that thing of like, you do something for 10 years or 10,000 hours, it will keep, moving and growing, but like there's definitely lulls in there, and you're going to hit those points where
Sure.
you're just like, shit, like, is this going to happen? Like, is this going to keep moving? Like, there's got to be some lucky breaks in there to happen too. And
Yeah,
sometimes
I
it
think
just
I
doesn't.
think part of it for us was so running a record label. It first for Empire was this like as a symbiotic thing where like Empire helped Counting Lucky Stars and Counting Lucky
Yeah.
Stars and helped Empire, and then it got to be this thing where they were both competing for attention. It just wasn't really possible to give 100% to both of them. And
Yeah.
in almost every case, I would choose the label because other people were depending on me
Right.
and
Right.
and like relying on me, and I couldn't have that on my shoulders. And part of that too was every time we would go on tour, we would bring out a band smaller than us to help them grow.
Right.
But we were almost never brought out
Right.
to open up for a band that
Yeah.
could, you know what I mean? And so like I got to, you were seeing bands that didn't exist and then were super small and then were drawing more than you and getting more acclaim and more
Yeah.
popular than you. And that, I'm not like at all bitter or anything like that, but I'm also realistic in the fact that like I
Right.
just realized it just wasn't in the cards for us to, to get it to whatever that
Yeah.
fictional next level was.
Yeah. That's funny that you say that because we were almost the opposite where we never really did any headlining stuff. We were brought out a bunch to open, but similarly, we were thinking, oh my God, we're getting these tours. Like we're gonna play with this huge band. We're going out with Newfound Glory for 9 days. How can this not be great for us? And then we're just looking at a sea of people who don't give a shit, and we're just
Yeah,
like, oh God, like you just make these assumptions about, oh, this many people at a show. There's bound to be this many people who like you, but even when you have opportunities, you can just see it just fall on its face. And you're like, oh, okay, so
sure.
it works this way too.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about that in that perspective. For we
Yeah.
did we did open up for the early November on an
Oh,
acoustic
nice.
tour,
Yeah.
which was really cool, and the guys in that band were super nice and sort of like we were not used to that side of touring where like we got buyouts every night and
Yeah.
sound checks every night and
It's a
stuff like
beautiful
that, which
thing.
is yeah, it was pretty awesome. But I do definitely know what you're talking about as far as like we were that band that people had to wait through to
Right.
see the early
Yeah.
November, right? And it was also acoustic, and we are very much like a dynamic space band, so it was
Sure.
interesting to, and I don't know how successful or maybe how accurate that really was to what our true sound was if you could
Yeah.
get somebody to but it's difficult to it's very difficult to get somebody interested in it. So here we were playing like DIY spaces all the time in basements
Yeah.
and all that stuff and doing quite well on those tours. And then we did that tour, and like I mean the amount of money that we made on that tour was like peanuts compared to what we had normally made.
Right.
And So it was interesting to see, like, in my mind, opening up for bigger bands is, it's supposed to be you're making less because
Right.
you're
Getting
getting
more
the
exposure.
exposure,
Yeah.
right? And I can definitely see how that wouldn't always work out in that case either. I mean, I don't think anything really. I almost feel like it's gonna happen if it's gonna happen, and if
Right.
not, it's just not. And that's
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you on that acoustic thing. When we toured with Saves the Day, that was their acoustic tour, and we were a full band before them. So imagine that dichotomy, like this band that people are, have dedicated their lives to, and they're going to
right,
see them in
yeah,
such an intimate setting, and before them, four fucking goofballs going on stage, just being as loud and
yeah.
energetic
You
as
guys were an
possible.
intense band too, so
So the dichotomy between, well, so no, there was another band too called Single File, and they were like a pop punk band, and
okay,
so it was two full bands, two loud electric full bands, and then closing with an acoustic band, and not only an acoustic band but Saves the Day. So it was
right,
that thing too of like, yeah, people are going there to hang out and chill and sing their favorite songs, and not only that, like if they're in the mood for an acoustic show, who's to say they want to come see a loud ass band
yeah,
that they
yeah,
don't know? And and then here we are surprised that maybe not everyone's into that, like. And certainly Saves the Day were like more than kind to us, and it was great for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I mean, there is this thing of like, you assume you get a tour like that, like, okay, here we go, we're off
yeah,
and running. I mean, that
right,
kind of our career was like all these tours where we thought this was it, and then
uh-huh.
it wasn't. Like, it was helpful, we'd get a nice little group of fans out of it, but like it was never enough to sustain anything. I mean, yeah, these tours you're making, $150 a
Right, yep.
show,
And that's
like,
for everybody. I mean,
yeah,
that's not for
that's four people. That's just if
uh-huh.
you have the band, and
Hmm.
that's if there's no one else, and then that doesn't account for if you sold merch. That's I don't know what the drive was in between there.
Hmm.
Luckily
Yep.
we had no overhead because we all lived with our parents, but still, like, there's a lot stacked against you in those
Yeah, there really is.
circumstances.
And yeah, so that's interesting because we were doing an acoustic, which we weren't, because that was that was like a requirement of the tour. You had to
Okay,
play acoustic. And I
gotcha.
totally understand that because it's the vibe of it, right? But
Right.
so like the early November, they're it's funny because they're like the same age as I am, or like a little bit older.
Yeah.
But they're like staying in hotel rooms every night, and
Right.
you know what I mean? And we're like, sleeping on people's floors, which we were
Right.
accustomed to that. That's how we always did tour.
Sure.
Very rarely, and that's fine, but it's just really funny
Right.
of the contrast between,
Yeah. Yeah,
the
man.
two.
Yeah, when we, I mean, yeah, we did that tour with this weird ass tour with Schoolyard Heroes, Breathe Carolina, and Jeffree Star. And Breathe Carolina,
That's a random.
it is so random, dude. It was a tour of like us and Schoolyard Heroes, which, if you're not familiar with them, are kind of like My Chemical Romance-y,
Hmm.
kind of dark band, but very cool and like a really tight band. So like two live rock bands, and then two like electronic, like whatever those bands are, offensive and just like neon and shit.
Yeah,
But Breathe Carolina were
it's
super young dudes, and a lot of them, and they were just like, having huge shows and partying and making this money, and we were just like, eating scraps and watching all this and just being like, are we doing the right thing? Like, is this, have we carved the right path for ourselves? Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's just so interesting. I think you make, and I'm certainly guilty of this, you just make a lot of assumptions, because I think a lot of people who represent you too assume that too. They go, okay, if I can get my
oh
band
yeah,
on this tour, this means this, and great for them, and that'll mean this and this. And it's like, everyone's just kind of crossing their fingers the whole time,
absolutely.
and that's
Yeah,
all
it's such
that
a
is.
gamble.
It is, and you're kind of,
Yeah, the
you're
glass is always half. You always think the grass is greener in that case.
sure,
Like if just had one thing had happened, like
right.
this person had taken interest in you or
Yep.
whatever. But I think going on the early November tour was very, very cool, but also kind of like, and like our new album came out, and it sold out in in the pre-order. We sold like over 2,000
Wow.
copies before it even came out. And we had to do a repress. We were not expecting, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So we had to do like a repress right away. And I don't know. And like there was various like Billboard charts, and like we had streams at NPR and
That's
Stereo and
awesome.
all these cool places, and it felt really good, right? And at the same time, right before that our album came out, we had the Early November tour, and so I was like, all right, like
Right.
things are really really starting to happen, and then they just didn't, you
Yeah.
know. And it's not like we didn't. It did better than we had ever done before.
Right.
But it just never took off like I
Yeah.
expected it did too. So
And at least you had the advantage, and this isn't to say, I mean, you had to bust your ass to make a label that could sustain you, but at least you had the advantage of not being like, oh, is this label going to put out another record? Like, no,
right, yeah,
you're probably not going to kick your own band off of it, assuming, I mean, that that it's working out the way you want it to. But I mean, yeah, we put out the first record, and then we started talking to Vagrant and started just to see the interest
hmm
just drain, and we're like, oh fuck,
yeah,
like, okay, I guess this is where we got to start considering a plan B. But at the very least, for your situation, you not to say it made it any easier, but at least you knew there was that in place, and you kind of could look at it and go, okay, like I know what to expect from me. It's not like I have to rely on anybody else's, you
yeah.
know.
That was a great adventure because I mean, I'll be the first to admit that we have a ridiculous discography. I mean, we put out something like over like 50 or 60 songs or something. We have like, I don't know, like eight split 7 inches or some
Yeah.
stupid number, right? So like, I don't think if anybody else ran a label, if we were a band that didn't run our own label,
Right.
I'm not sure that that would have been a possibility,
Right.
which might have been better anyway, because maybe we would have focused on putting out more full lengths or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, it is what it is. Our
Right.
career happened however it happened, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was nice to know that we never had to ask anybody for anything. We could just do it, you know.
So two things I want to touch on before we jump off of this. One, now that you're not in the band, that you don't have to split your time between that and the label, do you are there things like, does the label feel any easier to run, or like that because you can devote the more time, or were you in such a system of like doing it all, like there really isn't much of a difference?
I think I was in, yeah, I think I was in. Well, okay. So what happened after, even for periods of time when if we weren't like a chunk of time that we weren't touring or whatever.
Yeah.
At that point, Kathy was working a full-time job where she was doing 4 10-hour shifts. So
Damn.
she
Yeah.
was gone, and she was like, she would go into work a little bit later, so she wouldn't get home until like 8 or 9 or
Yeah.
like at the earliest, you know. And so we weren't eating dinner till like 10 or 11 or
Yeah.
something, but it was I've been for 5 years. I did the label and the band as my only job, and I was going a bit stir crazy. So then when we got interns, and that started to help, and then I had an employee, and that helped as well. But I really missed that social
Yeah.
interaction, you know, and like being able to talk to people and go to a place and clock in and clock out, and you can leave it there. So
Yeah.
I got my master's degree in library sciences,
Oh wow.
and yeah, and so actually when I was working at a library when I got my master's degree, and Empire was still happening, and then I quit the library, moved back in with my parents, you know, again because not having an
Right.
income, and we started touring a lot more and doing the label a lot more. It was like kind of a litmus test to see if it was possible.
Yeah.
Um, and then, you know, for 5 years, that's all I did. And last, I think probably like 9 months ago or something, and Empire was still banned, but I knew that we were not going to be a band. Um, I got a job at a library again, so it's only part time, so I still am able to do the label, but it also gets me um, out of the house and kind of
Yeah.
fulfills that like, and it's nice to have a non fluctuating source of income,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
because you never, it depends how well something's doing. You have to reorder something. If this
Right.
goes wrong, that it's nice to have that. Like, and I think also this is true for anyone, where when you have less time, I think you're more efficient with the time that you do have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
it
true.
sort of made me more efficient um, with that time, you know.
Well, and to me, it's just so funny because I think when you start in a band, when you go down that path, there's a lot of talk of like, you will never catch me in a cubicle. You'll never see me doing a 9 to 5. And then you do that long enough and you like kind of almost crave that structure. Like I do a job where I work in a
Oh,
cubicle and I,
absolutely.
and I do that. I'm like, you know what? It's nice to fucking have consistency. Like
Hmm.
after you don't have it for a while, like you start to see why people do it. Like, okay, yeah, I can get
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Right.
And some of the things that I got to experience, the people I got to meet,
Yeah.
the most amazing things in the world. But it is very, very nice to, after touring for and being in a band, the same band for 10 years and
Yeah.
being bands, so many bands, it's really nice to be to have the comforts of home,
Yeah.
and to like go to the same place every day and not
Yeah.
have to sleep on the floor and not have to wonder where you're next.
Right.
So
And
yeah.
I think it's something that actually whenever my mom and I get into talks about this, she's like, I really noticed a change in you when you started being in the band or like going through that. And I think a big part of like similarly, like, there's a lot of great experiences and I would never change it for the world. But I think something that I never really expected is how much it would kind of affect my personality because when
Hmm.
you do that enough, when you're sleeping in vans, you're sleeping on floors, you're just grinding it out, you start I mean, you can become bitter. You can go that route, but what it
Yeah.
did for like, me and a lot of people that I know in other bands is, I mean, it really makes you humble. Like you see all the kindness of people letting you sleep in their
Yeah.
houses, trusting you,
Absolutely.
and you just become that person where then you want to provide that for people. And you're just like, yeah, you start to, I mean, it's not like life is easy. I mean, you go through some shit and it kind of just shows you, oh yeah, like, you can have it worse. Like, it kind of just humbles you. And it's a nice little
Yeah, it
thing that
makes
you
you
don't expect.
really appreciate a lot of things. Yeah, like you said, the kindness of
Yeah.
strangers, and those people can become really, important people in your life.
Yeah.
And like, also the thing that I really learned is how much I mean, when you don't have something, like when
Yeah.
you're away as often as you are, it really makes you appreciate home. It really
Yep.
makes you appreciate, the people that are in your home life and
Yeah.
and your family and so stuff like that. And so I think that um you know I think that going so many places made me realize how much, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have realized how much I love where I live now and the kind of lifestyle I live now, because I like I don't I really, we played in numerous big cities and lots of places, and we live in like a small town, which the population is something like 8,000 or something,
Yeah.
and it's pretty small, and the pace of life is really slow, and there's like never traffic and stuff. That's what I really like.
Yeah.
But I don't think I really realized that, until I got to experience moving to California and then not working out and going on tour and going visiting all these amazing places, which are amazing to visit. But for me, this is very much.
Right. Yeah, it really gives you perspective.
Yeah.
Um, well, awesome, man. Well, the one last thing I want to get into because this is something that I've yet to talk to someone about, and I think it's a really interesting perspective that involves you and your band. Is you were, I mean, for the entirety of the band, most of it, you were in a band with your wife. That's something that not everybody. I mean, that's a dynamic that is something I have no experience, very little experience with, and a lot of people don't tend to. So for you two, did that make anything different? Was it for you was just like were you able to separate that, or was that sometimes hard? Like if you I mean, couples get into fights then, but you still got to go on stage and like play a show. So like there's so many things there that could potentially, and potentially, yeah, I mean, people date in bands and break up and that breaks up bands. So what did you see as, being with your significant other in the same band as like any, kind of like pros and cons?
Well, when we first were looking for members, we were so afraid to tell people that we were married
Yeah.
because we knew that that would be the perception.
Yeah.
But once I think people knew us, it was never that never became an issue.
Yeah.
And I'll say that um, we very rarely get into fights. I mean, it does happen, but we do really. But the reason that is because Kathy made me like she made me a much better person, and she
Yeah.
made me, and so I think that because when I was younger, I had a bad temper,
Yeah.
but she I think was a big hand and and sort of like fixing that as years went on, and sort of like making me, where now people, if you talk to anybody I've met through the band, I mean, they would be very surprised, that I had a bad temper,
Yeah.
you know. So, I don't know. She's my best friend.
Yeah.
So it was never weird to me in that manner. The amazing thing was we got to share all these
Right.
incredible experiences together. I mean, we went to Japan together. We went to Europe together. We went,
Yeah.
we met some of our favorite bands together, and we just got to do everything together. It was incredible, but at some point, playing in a band was never her dream. It was
Right.
my dream, and she really really enjoyed it. But at some point, she realized that I think also touring for a girl is harder than touring for
Oh,
a
I
guy for a
guarantee it
myriad of
is.
reasons, and also she kind of got tired of sleeping on floors and just the
Sure.
whole lifestyle or whatever. And I think the hardest hurdle that we had to overcome was the fact that I could keep doing it
Yeah.
even if she wasn't doing it. Like
Yeah.
she was still writing the music, and she would still come on tours, but not the same frequency that I would,
Yeah.
So, but I mean, one of the reasons was so we were running a record label, and that cost a lot of money to do.
Yeah.
Um, and being in a band costs money to do. And when both of us were in the band, not making that money, it sort of became one of those sacrifices to keep everything going. And it kind of worked out anyway because she, was kind of feeling that way. But so she got a full-time job, and
Yeah.
she was able to take care of that end, where I was able to keep on going touring and doing, more of the label end because she was doing a full-time job.
Right.
Um, but it was just, and I don't, and again, if you ask any of our bandmates, I don't think that was never an issue that we were, married as far as like
Right.
issues. I probably in earlier days gotten way more fights with band members than I did with Kathy. So,
Yeah.
because she's just a really non-confrontational
Yeah.
person, and but I mean, but at the same time, I understand that why you'd be leery. I think part of it was for us. We had a history before, we started dating in
Right.
high school. We were married,
True.
and but I mean, like just knowing, I don't know, it was amazing because we got to experience a lot of things together, and it was really hard to be away from her. I think, but it was harder for her than it was for me because I was doing things where she was
Right.
at home, not
Right.
doing things.
That's and I keep talking about it and I'm gonna do it at some point is I wanna get an interview with, like I don't know if it's gonna be multiple significant others like in one episode or something, but get that perspective where,
Hmm.
my wife at the time we were dating and that's no that's no easy route
No.
either. Like you can I mean, even for that person, even if they are busy, like at a certain point, they're just like, yo, how long are we going to do this for? Like,
Oh
like they
yeah.
see other couple. I mean, and you'll do it on the road too. You'll see couples and be like, damn, I wish I had that. But if you're busy chasing your dream and they're, at home kind of waiting in
Hmm.
between, then yeah, I mean, that's no easy position to be in. So,
I tell you one thing that was really advantage though is because when she stopped going on tour as often, she knew what it was like to be on tour.
yeah,
So she knew that there were a lot of times I couldn't talk. You know what I mean? It
yeah,
just wasn't possible
right,
because I was busy when she wasn't busy, and she was busy when I wasn't busy.
right.
Um, so like, and it seems even silly to mention this stuff because we've been together for so long, and it just is not a thing. So, but implicitly, we always trust each other, so she's never worried about
Sure.
any of that kind of stuff. It
Yeah.
seems even, but so just I think with a lot of trust and a lot of love, we sort of let each other do the things that ended up making us more comfortable and more happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely difficult, and that was that was definitely a factor.
Yeah.
I mean, in that, and then also when that truck ran into her house. I mean
Jesus.
that but that was one of those things where like it sort of made me stop because there are things in life that happen, right, that make you stop, and
Yeah.
you have to deal with that.
Right.
And it could be a sudden thing like um like an accident or somebody, getting cancer or something terrible like
Right.
that, or it could be a planned thing like you guys had a baby. But life changes when it changes,
Yeah.
and but when that happened, um, and we didn't have a van, it was just difficult. It just sort of made me. It kind of took me out of that mentality of always to have to keep going, and sort of, I had been contemplating before, but that's what really took me out, I think, and made me think like, okay, I think that this is sort of at the moonlight of our career. So
yeah. Well, shit, man, we got through a lot there.
Yeah.
you gave me the whole path and more. Thank you, man. That's awesome. Gave me a lot of good insight in like the entirety of your music career, and a lot about the label, and just it was really cool. It was really cool to learn a lot about you as a musician and the band, and kind of just your life. So it was I appreciate it, man. That was an awesome interview.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to
Absolutely.
talk to me.
Any things you want to plug or talk about? Floor is yours.
Yeah, it's weird though. I mean, I stopped playing guitar. The band was done. I just stopped playing music, period, for like a long time, and only recently I wanted to. It was one of those things where I wanted to see if it was going to come back to me or not. You can't force something,
right.
And recently I started picking up the guitar again and started writing, and it felt really good to take that break and to have that like definite ending of one project. And now I think gonna work on something new. There's a new band that I'm working on called Onet, which is a Earthbound reference. It's with Warren and Gooey, and either Marcus or Stewart. Marcus from who's been Dowsing and is in Pet Cemetery now, or Stewart, who is in like Warren Franklin and Joie de Vie, depending on which of those have time. You know what I mean? Because things get busy. We've got a new band we're gonna do, hopefully. But it's one of those things where like if it happens, awesome, and if it doesn't, it's okay.
Yeah.
So
and anything coming out on the label that you're excited about, or anything happening in your life you're excited about? I mean,
there's an amazing band that our old drummer John had showed me at some point called the Player Piano.
Okay.
And they're really, really good. And in an interview, I had talked about how much I liked them, or like and the owner of that label recently contacted me, and we're going to be reissuing their LP and vinyl for the first time.
Oh, nice!
So that's gonna be really cool. So yeah, excited for that.
Well, awesome, man. Well, I wish nothing but the best of luck with the label and potential future music projects on your own, and your happy little family, you, Kathy, and Ollie. And hope no more trucks come smashing into your.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We need a sign like 1 year free.
Yeah, this many days before until a truck is smashed into this house.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate the time you gave me. A lot of time tonight, so thanks a lot, man. It was good catching up with you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, buddy. Best of luck with everything, and let's talk soon.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Thanks.
All right, man.
Okay, bye.